It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, July 28th. State Representative Paul Holvey is one of the most powerful Democrats in the Oregon House. He got there in part because of his close ties to labor unions. So it surprised a lot of people earlier this year when one of those unions announced it would try to recall Holvey. The result could be a civil war of sorts in Eugene later this year. We're going to walk you through this head-turning sequence of events in this week's episode. I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
And I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk VanderHart.
Dirk, just start us off with the basics here. Who is Paul Holvey?
Paul Holvey is one of the longest-serving Democrats in Salem. He was first elected to represent Eugene in the House in 2004. Before that, he was a carpenter and a representative for his carpenters union. And that labor identity really has driven Holvey's service. It's very much a part of his legislative persona. Holvey is the longtime chair of the House Business and Labor Committee, which means he has a major say in what policies pass impacting labor laws and business regulations. And his chairship of that committee actually has sometimes inspired grumbling from detractors who say Holvey has too great of an affinity for labor groups. Some people jokingly say the committee should be named Labor and Business instead of Business and Labor. But his influence doesn't end there. He has ascended nearly to the top of House leadership. He's the House Speaker pro tem, meaning he fills in for House Speaker Dan Rayfield when he's not around. And in fact, Holvey was briefly House Speaker himself not that long ago, when now Governor Tina Kotek left her role as Speaker to run for governor last year. Holvey filled in as Speaker for a time. So he's familiar, been around a long time, pretty influential guy.
And like you just mentioned, everyone who knows Holvey knows he's been a labor supporter. I mean, it is, as you covered, like a calling card of his. So it really shocked both Holvey and his allies in May when the state's largest private sector union, United Food and Commercial Workers Local 555, announced it was going to try and recall him. So where is this coming from?
Right. And I think that's a question a lot of Democrats continue to ask. Just to set the stage here just a bit, UFCW is a pretty sizable player in the state. As you mentioned, it's the largest private sector union. It's got about 27,000 members. A lot of those folks are grocery store employees. And the union's basic case here seems to be that Holvey is more an impediment these days to its members than an ally. And it points to a couple of things to make that case. Just one instance, last year, UFCW was trying to get the legislature to send targeted stimulus payments to frontline workers because they made these sacrifices during the pandemic that obviously would have helped its members in grocery stores. But the legislature didn't wind up going with that proposal. It went with something more watered down, and UFCW blames Holvey for that in some respect. The main thing, though, seems to be the death of a bill that UFCW put forward this year. That's House Bill 3183. This is a bill that would have made it easier for workers in cannabis dispensaries to unionize, but it didn't get a vote to clear Holvey's committee and go to the floor. Instead, Holvey sent it to another committee, the Rules Committee, where it wound up dying. The union says Holvey refused to talk to it at length about this idea. He kind of just wrote it off, and that it was sort of a final straw for them. So UFCW has taken the nuclear option, basically, of trying to recall him.
So the union has basically said Holvey's no longer the friend to labor that he once was. How has Holvey and his other allies responded?
I mean, they have vehemently denied this. Holvey says, when it comes to the bill that died this year, he had concerns that that bill would be preempted by federal law. In fact, he has a couple legal opinions that suggest that's a possibility. And he also says he didn't kill the bill. He sent it to another committee to leave room for some sort of compromise, but that compromise never happened. I spoke with Holvey right after news of this recall came out and talked to him about the claims about 3183. Here's what he said.
I'm very surprised they'd pursue this sort of retaliation over this particular bill, or the House Bill 3183. I mean, just because I am a strong labor person, I grew up in labor and have always pursued, legislation to help working people. So it does surprise me.
And meanwhile, Holvey's been around the Capitol for 2 decades, right? He has a lot of friends. Senate Democrats have leapt to his defense. They sent a letter to the union urging it to back down. And in fact, they got a very strongly worded letter back from the union that sort of castigated legislative Democrats in general. Democrats are continuing to apply pressure. They've made clear they will fight this. They are pretty fired up about all this.
I mean, I think that's one thing that really stands out about this recall effort is that a lot of powerful lawmakers are in Holvey's corner and upset that the union is trying to recall him. And again, they're trying to do this recall because union officials are upset that Holvey didn't support this bill they wanted. So could the union be heading down sort of a dangerous path and possibly endangering other priority bills it has in the future by taking this approach?
Absolutely. That's one thing that stands out here. A lot of things stand out here. I mean, let's just start out by saying labor groups like UFCW are typically key allies of Democrats, both in terms of fundraising and sort of helping candidates put together a ground game during campaign season. Now we have a union targeting one of the state's more labor-friendly Democrats, setting up this huge clash. It's just not something we see happen. But you're right. The other thing that stands out here is that UFCW is doing this sort of scorched earth approach, at least as far as the Capitol is concerned. And they are very upfront about this. They know that this effort is going to hurt the union's standing in Salem. So they're basically saying they're just not going to participate in the legislative process anymore. Rather than pushing bills in coming sessions, they say they're just going to go directly to voters by pushing ballot measures, wash their hands of lawmakers, and just go their own route. One wonky piece of this shows how serious the union is about all this. And so I just want to mention it. So under normal process, if the union filed a recall petition against Holvey, it would only then be able to start recruiting people to go out to collect signatures. That means there could be a lag time from the time they file the petition to when they can actually start collecting signatures. But UFCW was so gung-ho about recalling Holvey that it actually filed a separate ballot measure with the state earlier in the year. It had no intention of pursuing that ballot measure. Virtually the only reason it did that was so it could have something before the state that would legally allow it to begin hiring signature gatherers so that when they did file a recall petition against Holvey, they were ready to go. That is how serious they are taking this. I mean, no one in this situation is playing around.
Yeah, wow, they're really determined. This is not your first rodeo when it comes to covering recalls. Let's talk a little bit about how they work in Oregon and what it would take for the union to make this a reality.
Yeah, under state law, to force a recall election, in this instance, the union needs to collect signatures equal to 15% of the voters in Holvey's district who cast a vote in last year's gubernatorial race. And obviously, all those signatures have to come from voters in Holvey's district. So that amounts to about 4,600 signatures. The union has until August 21 to collect those. And if it succeeds, there would be a special recall election held shortly after. One thing to note on this, Lauren, is that since Holvey is a state representative, he has to run for re-election every 2 years, which means he would have to run next year anyway, providing an opportunity for the union to potentially oppose him then. And UFCW says it just doesn't want to wait. It wants to force an election earlier. I mean, just another thing that sort of highlights how big of a nuclear option they are executing here.
Wow. And it's not really uncommon anymore for aggrieved groups to announce that they're going to try and eject a lawmaker. But normally those efforts don't go anywhere. But this has felt different.
Right. I mean, think about the past 5 years or so, right? We've seen, I think, 3, maybe 4 recalls launched against former Governor Kate Brown. We've seen recalls against Democrats and Republicans over votes that were unpopular with some groups. And none of those seem to go anywhere, right? These are not usually particularly very politically savvy groups running these. It's more grassroots. They don't get the signatures and just kind of fizzle. In the case of UFCW, it's a bit different. The union has put serious money into gathering signatures. It's ponied up $100,000 to date, and it's just got the political machinery and wherewithal to carry this out. I was talking to Mike Salvaggio, who is the union's political director, about this after the union submitted 6,600 signatures. Here's what he told me.
We're very confident that this will put us over that threshold. If it, for whatever reason, doesn't, we will still have until August 22nd to collect additional signatures to fill that gap.
So that was earlier this month. They were saying they'd put in an initial batch of signatures. They were pretty sure it was going to qualify and were making plans for this election. And Holvey's people have seemed confident, too, that there's an election coming. Holvey had been trying to sort of dissuade voters from signing the petition. That was his initial approach to this. But that changed in recent weeks. Instead, he's been spending weekends knocking on doors to chat with voters, familiarize himself with them and them with him, in preparation for a recall, sort of assuming that one was coming.
Right. So that is how it looked until last week, when the Secretary of State's office actually analyzed the signatures that the union submitted. And that tally did not go the way the union expected. Election officials found that the signature sheets contained just a little bit more than 2,600 valid signatures, way, way less than the union predicted.
Right. Yeah. This was an unpleasant surprise, I think it's fair to say, for UFCW. It was a delightful turn of events for some of the Democrats that sort of gleefully reached out to me when this news emerged. I spoke with Salvaggio, the UFCW political director, this week about it. And he says the union is still analyzing its signature sheets, trying to figure out why the validity rate was so low. Remember, he was predicting 85 to 90%. They were around 40%. He also made a point of saying that union observers were kept at a distance as elections officials were analyzing these signatures, though he stopped short of making any accusations there. The question now, I think, is what happens next. Like I said, the union has already dumped $100,000 into this at least. But it's got 3 weeks or so from the day we're recording this to finish collecting signatures. Salvaggio says he believes that's very doable, and assuming that's right, and the board of the union approves continuing on with this, I still think it's well within the realm of possibility that Holvey will be up for a recall.
Well, we have mentioned that Holvey has a lot of allies in Salem, and a lot of those friends include the Democrats that run the Capitol, who are promising to defend him if an election is forced. But he also has a lot of friends among labor unions still, right? So what does this look like if UFCW succeeds in forcing a recall election?
So this could get very interesting. I think that's a huge understatement. I mean, it really has the potential to blur some of the lines of political allyship that we've gotten used to in Oregon. Holvey is touting pretty much the entire Democratic political machine in his corner. That includes, Future PAC, which is the political action committee that runs campaigns for House Democrats, but also SEIU, the largest union in the state, the Oregon Nurses Association, advocacy groups like the League of Conservation Voters that are very, very politically active. Basically, he's got a bunch of people that are pretty seasoned in campaigns in his corner. And if this goes to an election, the clashing of those forces with UFCW, which is a formidable sort of entity in itself, will be fascinating to watch, at least for me. Like I said, this is the kind of thing we just don't see in Oregon politics too often.
Well, if the recall does move forward, we will certainly be on it. Dirk, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
This episode of OPB Politics Now was produced by Julie Sabatier. Our audio engineer is Naleen Silva, and our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. While you're there, why not click the big red Contribute Now button and become an OPB member? You can also rate and review us in your podcast app of choice. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.